Well, everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey, everybody, Cantonese Cat here. On Monday, I came out in a video talking about NVDA, as well as a few other stocks that have pretty big exposures to. It just had its earnings, and the earnings were great. You remember on Monday, I was saying that I had a hard time really seeing things being pushed way too far because we're simply on the monthly just overextended still a little bit. And we basically just spent the last couple of months just going sideways because red candles just closed way outside the upper Bollinger Band on the monthly chart. And we generally have something like this, you actually need some time to kind of cool down. It doesn't really matter how bullish the earnings were. It really doesn't matter. We're not going to keep doing stock buybacks. None of these things matter. Technical matters when it comes to things that are just way overextended. And really what you're seeing here is the top part was really like around 131 or so. I really have a hard time seeing the monthly really close at or above the upper Bollinger Band. And there was a huge implied volatility before earnings for NVIDIA. So I really thought that NVIDIA is probably going to go back down and then probably going to end up closing back above, somewhere around where the price was today when it closed. That's my most likely scenario. And, sure enough, right now is kind of finding support where it needs to find. I'm going to show a little bit in terms of where I think the support is going to be underneath. But I really do think that most likely we're going to just end up range bound, maybe even for a little bit longer, for another month or two for NVIDIA. That's entirely possible. At this point, on a higher time frame, because price is just kind of sideways for about 3 months now, it really does remind me of some of the previous price action, kind of like how it was over here from September to November 2020. And it really does remind me from the price action around December 2016 to maybe around February 2016. We might have a little bit longer sideways to go here. We might have a little bit longer sideways to go here, just like we might have a little bit longer sideways to go here, just to kind of cool down a very, very big parabolic move, right? And at this point, I really do think that the Bollinger Band, the low Bollinger Band, had stopped to expand. I keep talking about this over and over again. The low Bollinger Band really stopped to expand around January 2017, and which is basically the start of this sideways trend over here. And whenever you have Bollinger Band contraction, that's usually mean that the trend's starting to get exhausted. You might make another like 2, 3, or 4x, but you're not going to make another 10x, right? Same thing over here. I think Bollinger Band stopped expanding around September 2020. And that really is when the trend starts to get exhausted. You might make another like 2, 3, 4x, but generally that's going to be a little bit of a trend exhaustion there, right? When you have a Bollinger Band contraction. And so far, we have this sideways action here for about 3 months, and so far the Bollinger Band is starting to contract, right? So that does tell me, hey, maybe we're going to be hitting a little bit of trend exhaustion. Maybe we make another 2, 3, 4x. Maybe it gets up to maybe like 400 or something like that. And I think that's probably going to be it for the cycle. We're probably having a pretty significant correction, but that might not happen for another like 12 to 18 months, based on every single cycle when this kind of happens. I think we might be like around like the mid point of the bull cycle, and money is probably going to having to rotate to other assets here too. But incredible company, but the technicals unfortunately is just is not going to just keep going up, without pausing, without having a little bit of trend exhaustion, without having a little bit of cool down, just because that's just generally how cycles go. Even though the fundamentals, the valuation of the metrics actually would support NVIDIA to go up higher, but you actually don't want it to go up, mooning like that. You actually want to take a step, maybe make another 2, 3, 4x, and then that's actually not a bad amount of gains here. The other thing I was also thinking, I really don't think that probably just going to end up shooting up with this earning, is because you look at the Ichimoku Cloud analysis, you see it just kind of backtested the Tenkan. It's still a little bit too far away from the Tenkan. I don't like it to be too far away from the Tenkan, because if it is, then you are still at risk to having a little bit more correction. So I think that the Tenkan over here, until it's able to go up to match price, is probably going to serve as a little bit of a magnet here for price to not be able to go up that much further. And sure enough, like if you look at the price right now, we had -7, -8% post earnings. It sounds scary, right? But not really. I mean, like price was down to like the 90 range around here just earlier this month. So this is actually like this volatility is actually nothing compared to that. So as far as I'm concerned, I still believe in bullish continuation, but you might end up having a little bit more sideways. And I think there's going to be some rotation to from these large cap stocks like NVIDIA that's just made a 10x, maybe over to a lot of these underperforming stocks like fintech, like the small cap stocks, or even may I say it, may I dare say it, even potentially Bitcoin miners. There might be some rotation that could happen from these kinds of things that I'm kind of eyeing here. Now, if you ask me where the support level is going to be, I think the best thing to look at is probably going to be looking at the weekly chart here in terms of where you could potentially find support. Well, if you look at the Super Ichi cloud, you're going to have some support here around 116, which is currently where price is kind of around right now post earnings. So that could potentially be a support level. It could potentially go down a lot lower though, right? For example, it could go down to some of the lower levels over here. The tank is around 113, the kitchen is around 108. So those are some potential levels for it to go down. The bullish support bands also right underneath around like 110, 111, somewhere around there. So you still have plenty of these kinds of support levels underneath. So even if it goes down, like I really do think that you're going to end up finding support here. I think this is like the big move with VIX going to like right into 60. I don't think this is going to be easily replicable. And we're probably going to find support anywhere from the current price over here all the way down to maybe 110 and 108, somewhere around there. It's probably going to be as low as NVIDIA goes. And the closer it gets to some of the levels down here, the better risk reward ratio I think it's going to be. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm seeing here for NVIDIA. And if you are talking about another way to kind of look in terms of where you think support level is going to be, you look at the daily chart. Right now, price is kind of right around the 20-day moving average. So basically, it just kind of went way too far, way too fast for 12 days in a row, and it's got a little bit of rolling overlook. Little to like maybe a little bit of a distribution here for a short-term run here, going back down to retrace back to the mean before further bullish continuation. Right now. I gotta say this, if it hits the low Bollinger Band, hits the upper Bollinger Band, and retrace back to the mean here at the 20-day, and it bounced from the current area, and it keeps on bouncing up, that's a very, very bullish setup. I generally love these kinds of setup where if it hits the low Bollinger Band, upper Bollinger Band, and then retrace back to the 20, that could potentially set an explosive move coming up, right? So I'm actually not bearish at all based on price action. Could it go down potentially further? Sure, it can, right? But I already told you if it gets down to 110 to 108 range, that to me would be a pretty decent risk reward ratio over there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing with NVIDIA. I don't have too much else to say about that. I want to talk about a couple other stocks that have just gone through earnings today. CrowdStrike, which has been capturing a lot of people's imagination in terms of the volatility that it was bringing with this big giant red candle for the month of July, just because of some fundamental questions about their company, because of some update that didn't really work out for them. Now, all I gotta say is, technically speaking, I think this down move is not unexpected because things have just kind of gone way too far, way too fast. If anything, you've gone through this. Also look at actually a very, very beautiful 5 waves here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think a downtrend is kind of more or less completely expected. It's just that this candle over here is just absolutely brutal, and it really caught a lot of people off guard because of how bullish this stock has been, right? Now, do I think that it's probably going to end up going further down? Probably not. I think that the around the price 200 is probably going to be the bottom. I do not think that's going to end up making another 3-wave down like that. I think that that's probably going to be bottom because of a few reasons. One is, if you look at the Ichimoku cloud, you have the leading span A here. This is like the immature cloud. The cloud hasn't really been formed yet, but it's basically bouncing right off of the peak right there of the monthly cloud. Right? It's also bounced off of a very, very strong volume support zone. I have a hard time really seeing it go really punching through to the 100, so I really have a hard time seeing that. But right now, it's got a very strong support zone over here, but right now, it's also hitting some pretty strong resistance here, right? The strong resistance you're talking about is going to be around 250 to around 270. Very strong resistance, both on volume shelf. It's just basically have to range bound here, maybe a little bit before breaking out. But yeah, very strong resistance here. I'm going to show you in terms of why I think it's strong resistance here a little bit. You're also seeing some resistance over here on the Super Ichi Kijun on the red line right here. It got rejected right there. And if you also look at the weekly chart, you can also see that the Super Ichi cloud it's been serving as some pretty strong resistance here. Initially kind of stuck in range between the CPG Cloud, the Kitchen, and the Tenkan, and right now we're kind of broken underneath of that here. I do think that around the volume shelf over here, the bottom of the volume shelf over here, around like 250 is going to be some pretty decent support here. If it breaks down, a very strong support zone is going to be around like 230s, somewhere up there is going to be a pretty strong support level. Why do I say that? Well, if you look at the Ichimoku Cloud, the bottom of the weekly cloud is going to be around 240, and it could potentially wick down to like the high 230s potentially, and that would be a very strong support zone right there. I think there's a high probability that it might end up going down further, just because with this big giant down move over here in high volume, we have a little tiny move over here. It got rejected here. Again, that's another area of resistance, right? It got rejected over here on relatively low volume, right? So I can totally see it kind of retracing back down to like 240 or even 230s to kind of cool down this 3-week up kind of thing on relatively low volume. So yeah, it is what it is. It's unfortunate. I'm going to go back to the monthly here. I'm also going to tell you as to why I think that this stock is still bullish, because on the Bollinger Band, it still basically just hit the 20-month moving average and it bounced up, right? So I think the 20-month moving average over time is going to end up keep pushing price up higher, and you might end up kind of get stuck inside a range, between maybe like 230s to maybe 250s, 260s, 270s for a little bit until the 20-month moving average is going to catch up, and maybe eventually it's going to push price up through this resistance zone over here and allow price to go higher over time. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Earnings really weren't that bad, to be honest. So that's kind of what I'm seeing with CrowdStrike. Now, I also can totally see, let's see, actually a Bollinger Band here doesn't really tell me anything here on the weekly here, but on the daily I can totally see price going back down to 250, right, which is going to be the daily, the 20-day moving average is just pointing up. They could overshoot down here a little bit to like the 240 and 230s, but you remember how I said I like the combo lower Bollinger Band, upper Bollinger Band retracing back to the mean. It was able to find like some kind of support here at the mean. I think that could build up some pretty bullish move over the next several months to like a year or so. But yeah, so far, CrowdStrike is probably going to require a little bit of patience here. I don't think it's just going to necessarily make a V-shaped recovery, just because it's hitting some resistance from multiple cents. You're talking about the Suppeichi Kitchen, you're talking about the weekly Suppeichi Cloud, you're talking about the weekly Ichimoku Cloud on the top of the cloud here. You're talking about a big giant volume shelf, right? So you're going to have to take some time to kind of correct this move, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. After making a big down move like that, there was a lot of technical damage that has been done, and it bounced where it needed to bounce, and it still need to work out some stuff, and it might get boring here for a little bit, but that's okay, and that's CrowdStrike for you. The next one, I actually have a stake in this stock, and I've actually been DCAing into this stock, and so far it looks like it might finally be working out. This brutal downtrend for about like 8 months has been absolutely brutal on like no volume at all, and I basically just think the lower it goes, and I don't know where it's going to go. Like, could it bounce at this level around 30? Possible. Could it bounce from a lower level? Possible. Could it bounce right here around like 25? Possible. Price may all the way down to like 22 on this big giant nasty down move over here on like no volume at all, and this down basically is like very, very non-committal. Next thing you know, we have a little bit of a very, very nice reversal pattern here. It's just the 3 white soldiers, and so far initially I was worried that, hey, maybe the trend's a little bit exhausted, but the volume is not really telling you that. The volume tells you that, hey, maybe there's some juice left here for a firm, because the down volume has like nothing, right? So I think there's a lot of accumulation by whales behind the scene. And you can see it every single time when there's a little bit of buying pressure here. There's like a very, very nice volume here. So I think whales have been really kind of buying behind the scene here, and you have the 3 white soldier really signifying probably a trend reversal, with earnings gone up for about like 15%. I mean, granted, this is a firm, it could just be a big giant wick and then just go all the way down. But so far, you have 3 white soldiers. It favors further bullish continuation, and it could be working out so far, right? A couple other things to look at a firm. If you're looking at it's underneath a lot of resistance, so I can totally see it being like a wick, and then it just kind of breaks back down to like 34.5 to kind of close the week. it can totally close back down to like 34.8, at the upper Bollinger Band there to close the week. And, it can totally just end up, retracing back down here a little bit, right? The Ichimoku cloud says there's a little bit more room to kind of go up, and it's nice that kind of went inside the cloud, back tested the cloud, and with great earnings, really, beat expectation. It can go up a little bit higher. But I just think that weekly, you're probably going to end up leaving a little bit of a wake up above, because I think we simply have just kind of made a very, very big move, and you're going to hit like some pretty strong resistance up above. I would like to see it hit the resistance and just kind of go sideways down a little bit, maybe back to 30. Wait for the 20-week moving average and kind of flatten, back test that, and then the next move could be very powerful, maybe by the end of the year to early next year. That's kind of where I'm seeing the firm. I don't expect anything to happen quite just yet. I do expect at some point it's going to probably end up retracing back down, and it's going to probably end up testing the Bollinger support band on the way up. And we'll see when that happens. I don't know exactly. It could even back test the bottom of the cloud here again eventually before the next move up. I can totally see that happening. But regardless, I think, like, to me, I think anything that's under like $35, I would love to buy more. Now that it's like, post market hours is like 36 point something. It's a little bit too risky based on what I'm seeing you from the technicals. I think we're hitting some pretty strong resistance, so I probably won't buy anymore. But if it retraces back down to like the low 30s, I think that would be a good, maybe possibly last chance opportunity to accumulate. And that's kind of how I see a firm. And even on the monthly chart here, there's really nothing bearish about it. The 20-month moving average just got back tested and is rising. And all this downtrend here is on low volume. It bounced where it needed to bounce here on the volume shelf. There's really nothing bearish about this chart. Like Super Ichi, sure, you underrated resistance. Maybe we're gonna get back over this, over the next upcoming months or so. The Ichimoku cloud here, we have reclaimed the kitchen, and I think the Tenkan up here, the blue line, is going to be a little bit of resistance. So it's probably going to take some time, range bound here for a little bit before breaking out. I can totally see that if it goes back down. I don't think it's going to go back down to like the mid 20s or low 20s anymore. I think the ship has probably sailed. If it does, great, I'll keep accumulating. I mean, like, this is a very, very nice chart. I've been bullish really ever since like April. I mean, I don't know, like, it's been just keep on going down low volume, but hey, whatever. Like, the more I accumulate on low volume going down, the better risk reward. So I'm just gonna buy whenever if price ends up going down underneath like 35 again, especially if it goes down to low 30s. I think it'd be a good buying opportunity. Another one that has earnings after hour is Salesforce. Actually, Salesforce has been pretty bullish in terms of what had happened. I'm going to show you as to what I mean by that. Just look at the monthly chart here. We put the Ichimoku cloud. It bounced from where it needed to bounce. It basically just went to the Ichimoku cloud, bounced, and then back tested the Ichimoku cloud when VIX went up to like 60 and above, right? And there's really not a whole lot of volume, and they really tested a lot of support, a lot of demand underneath. So far is getting a little bit rejected or Tenkan now to post after earnings. I don't see price closing above Tenkan probably for the end of the month. If it does, that'll be great. That'll be a very bullish development. But I can still see kind of range bound here a little bit. Right now it's at the top of the range. Until it breaks and closes the month above the Tenkan here for good. And Tenkan is going to be around 265.36. Until it really closes about the month there, I'm still a bit skeptical in terms of whether or not it's broken above the range. So far I'm just going to treat that this at the top of range right there. But I do think that around this wick over here, around this candle over here, around 212, that was probably the bottom. I'm going to show you a couple other things here too. Like if you look at the Super Ichi cloud, let me see. Yeah, I thought I saw something there, but never mind. Same thing here with Super Ichi cloud, just went through and then found support. Right now it's stuck in the range here in Super Ichi. So I think that it's probably going to end up needing some additional time. But the one thing that's very striking is that it keeps on finding support here, the 20-month moving average, and the 20-month moving average is pointing up. So it really tells us that the move is probably going to end up going up higher over time. And that's kind of also what earnings was saying too. And also a very interesting thing is that it bounced at the volume shelf right here where it's supposed to bounce at. And so far I see more signs, most likely further bullish continuation for Salesforce. I really don't see it, getting down that much further anymore. But it has to kind of break above the current range, which is going to be around like 270s. It was able to break above 270s for good. Maybe even up here like in the mid 270s. If it breaks above this range over here for good, then you're talking about price going back to like the 300, which is going to be double testing this high over here to see how it got rejected, where it got rejected here in the previous all-time high. None of these things are surprising. Overall, this is just a big giant cup, and this is the handle for it. And we're going to slowly kind of break back above over the next coming like 6 to 12 months to see whether or not in 6 to 12 months we can break above this all-time high and go higher. This is still a very bullish chart for me as far as I'm concerned. So one last one I want to talk about, I'm going to end the video here. This stock, OKTA, also had its earnings today. And the bottom line is this is definitely a little bit of a lagging, but it's channeling up, right? A little bit of a lagging stock here, but it's channeling up. It's finding support where it needed to find support at. It's right here in this big giant volume shelf over here. After hours, it did go down. And where did it go down to? At this volume shelf over here. So it's finding support, it's channeling up. And there's nothing to really say that this chart is particularly bearish or anything like that. So I think OKTA is probably going to still end up doing pretty well. It's finding support here, the 20-month moving average, where it's supposed to. If you're looking at the Ichimoku, you can see like initially it reclaimed the Tenkan backtested Kijun almost perfectly, right? Now it's kind of pricing to get back underneath the Tenkan here. We might close the month, a little bit below Tenkan, or we might close the month a little bit above. If it closed the month above the Tenkan here on the monthly, which is going to be around 90.82, that would be a pretty bullish development for the stock because it's a nice hammer candle that generally signifies it probably has bottomed. And if that's the case, then the next half a year or so is probably going to end up hitting the cloud up here, going back to the triple digits. After it's able to break above the 110 zone, it could hit like the 130s, 140s here at the bottom of the cloud over here. And that's going to be some pretty strong resistance confluent with this resistance zone over here at the volume shelf. So there are quite a few things to kind of think about here on this chart. Basically all it did is kind of have like a very, very nice zone over here, resistance, broke through, back test, pass, right? So generally these things should give you some pretty nice bullish continuation. It did end up kind of reclaiming the 20-week moving average here, and the price just kind of gone sideways for a very, very long time. But this is still building a relatively bullish structure. So I still think that most likely OKTA is going to have some bullish continuation here after it had to back test some of the level over here. It looks like I wanted to back test this horizontal zone over here one more time. And this is going to be some very, very strong support here. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing here with OKTA. If you look at the Ichimoku cloud, you can see that currently the price looks like it wants to back test the bottom of the cloud, and the bottom of the cloud is going to be around like, what is it, around 89.77, and that could be where price would end up, see whether or not the bottom of the cloud holds, which is going to be confluent with this volume shelf over here. And there's nothing really that bearish about it. It's just going sideways, but I think that it's important to think about this as a strong resistance zone over here, and now back testing as some pretty decent support. So not a bearish chart, but it might take a little bit longer to kind of break back above the 110 range up here. That's going to be resistance again. So if it finds support down here around like 89 or 90, it's going to probably end up being range bound here between 90 to 110 before further notice. So that is the last stock that I want to talk about that had earnings today. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Have a good one. Bye.